to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
My apologies, darlings. I messed up and got the Urban Fae before I finished the lions. Sorry about that. Anyway, back to part 2, A Place of Lions. So they have taken one of the Wise One's minions as captive. Sahin greeted his erstwhile companion from the expedition as the man stumbled drunkenly into the room, lit only by early morning rays of sunlight that slipped through the cracks that were inevitable in any structure of such tremendous age as the Palace of Lions. "You look ill-used, soldier. Perhaps your mind was too weak for them to seize," he barked an ironic laugh at his now fellow captive. Koyan, indeed, not the brightest of stars, glared more in confusion than anger. "We all thought you a meal, maybe a steaming pile of lion excrement by now. How are you alive? Did you desert us?" That is what Hamza believes, as I do. Sahin took his head and assumed the faraway stare to relay events, the veracity of which he was still unsure. "No, I have honor, unlike your boss. I thought I had fallen asleep. I fought hard to return to consciousness to escape the nightmarish creatures. Then I felt the need to walk, to go forward into the darkness. I was allowed to dodge stones and step over ruts, yet always I had to walk. Finally I walked into darkness and awakened to the same. The sunlight now relieves the night and offers only the sight of your fine features and foul words to greet me. Perhaps it is you who voluntarily left the team." Koyan continued to glare as he sank against the opposite wall, far from the rustic villager as possible. He rubbed at the punctures on his shoulder. They were not deep wounds, yet they ached and burned. They took me to be a meal for the rest of their pride, I think. They must have caught the stench of goat turds on your feet and clothing and decided not to feed you to their young. Sahin shrugged, though Koyan's eyes had not adjusted to the dimness well enough to see the gesture. "We may yet provide fodder for the creatures, but they have kept us alive for a reason. They are not mere beasts." "We are dealing with something different than mere beasts," Jim echoed. Sahin concluded, mainly for the benefit of Hamza and his remaining troops. "It was no lion that emptied the canteens, Malik. Malik here says it was a dream. He shook an empty canteen under the specified man's nose. Does it sound like a dream to you, Malik?" The man looked confused and distraught. He failed to respond angrily, as would be normal for his temperament. However, his leader took care of it for him. "I will not have you question my men." Hamza's angry voice rose into the pre-dawn air. "They would not desert us, and they would clearly not empty the canteens. Perhaps your previous village man is hiding out there, attempting to sabotage our work." It was Aslan's turn to grow angry. "My people are loyal. We agreed to this endeavor. None of us would do anything to harm it, much less hurt our own people." "Enough," Jim declared in a low, raspy voice. "We cannot bicker." He looked hard at Hamza. "I'm the one who caught Malik. Maybe he suffers from some kind of delirium, but the important fact is that we are now very low on water. The closest source to obtain more is the course that flows beside the old palace complex. We have a long march, and I will not share mine with you or your troops. If you are nice to Aslan and Tazi." He trailed off and glanced at the two rustics. They both wore the ghost of satisfied grins and tried to look nonplussed. They made no offer to share the contents of their canteen, It was indeed going to be a long march, Jim decided. No point in delaying further. An hour before noon, they reached the last crest in the rolling landscape and looked out and down on the valley that was their destination. "Looks like we still have some miles to go," Jim rasped. He pointed and then used his miniature field glasses to confirm that he believed he detected in the distance. "That's our goal, the Palace of Lions." He glanced up at the sun. "Looks like mid-afternoon at best before we arrive. More like late, but definitely before dark, if we keep up our current pace." He leaned forward as he stepped off to continue the journey. Aslan and Tazi quickly fell in on either flank. Aslan, Esk, and Malik parted along in their wake, their discipline and energy waning. Hamza was tempted to let the men drop some of their gear, yet he knew that they would need everything once they arrived at their destination. Had he still possessed the ability, he would have salivated when he detected the silver ribbon in the distance that wound through the lush greenery of the valley. The landscape appeared to be from another world than the one they had traversed for most of the past days. He found himself lurching slightly forward, the watercourse where a bend took it in their direction. It would be easier to go there first, and then turn towards the ruins. He was almost too tired and thirsty to seethe. He was sure that the infidel and his barbaric allies had something to do with emptying the water containers. Malik, not overly bright, but the man knew the value of water. He soon became cognizant that his mind had wandered off track, along with his feet. It finally occurred to him to announce his plan. "We will go to the stream first and then to the ruins. We must have water and a little rest. The lions will be out in force after dark." Jim didn't answer, but he agreed and turned slightly to seek the water before they sought the stones of the ancient builders. All of the men took refilling their canteens and skins. Jim looked out over the verdant landscape and spotted herds of several types, mostly grazing ungulates. They remained in the far distance, so it was difficult to identify each species. He didn't bother with the little field glasses for such matters. He focused those on the walls of the great building in the near distance. He strained to detect any movement that would indicate living residents, especially large maned ones. He found none. The area around the building was devoid of life. Even the breeze that swept through the valley seemed to cease in the vicinity of the eldritch structure. They soon resumed the final leg of their journey. In the sky above, large vultures wheeled in search of carrion. Jim noted that they kept circling back on his party and hoped that they would focus on Hamza, Esk, and Malik. Sahin felt weak with hunger, as he and Koyan were rudely awakened and nuzzled and growled to their feet by a pair of freakish lions. The large carnivores herded them down a corridor to a space similar to that which they had recently occupied. He was surprised to be greeted by a human voice. It arose from the shadowy interior of the next chamber in the corridor. "Ah, greetings, my friends. It seems we last survivors were in need of company, and our noble captors have obliged." Sahin grinned, despite the dank and frightening surroundings. "Dr. Sullivan, I presume? Your voice sounds familiar. You passed through our village on your way here." A coughing roar interrupted him, and he leapt forward into the dim grayness of the chamber, and Koyan managed to push past him, despite the narrow passage of the doorway. Dr. Sullivan spoke again. Don't be alarmed. They just didn't want to wait around while we discussed the news of the day. My guess is that they've decided it would be easier to keep all of the cattle in one pen." He shifted, and Sahin could almost make out his gesture. "This is Dr. Scott Kingsley. the leader of our expedition. Another silhouette stood, using the wall for support. Sahin recalled that the man had been older but healthy and wondered whether he'd been injured. "You may call me Scott. Dr. Kingsley sounds a little grandiose for a mere portion of the larder. I'm guessing that Dr. Sullivan will let you call him Lawrence. He hates being called Larry, so if you want to annoy him..." The older man laughed, just a little too heartily for one in his weakened condition. "Never mind, Scott. He's a bit feverish at the moment. Please find a space for yourself. We have water. It's disgusting, and we've both suffered from it, as I'm sure you can smell. There's a latrine hole over in the corner to your left. We have some food, not much and pitiful besides, but I suppose it's why they brought you to our cell. We are already accustomed to captivity, and they wish you to learn by our example." Sahin felt something pressed into his hands, some kind of fruit and a leafy substance. Koyan batted away the hands that bore the food that the infidel attempted to hand him in the darkness. Dr. Sullivan responded diplomatically. "Sorry for the touch. With the current light, depth perception is a struggle. Wait until nightfall, and we will be pure blind." Sahin nodded. "I have seen this place after dark," he sniggered. "Or not seen it. Do you know what it is? Are they really just holding us until they get hungry?" Lawrence shrugged in turn. "Well, we've been here for a while, since a few days after we arrived and began our exploration. Not sure how long that is. Anyway, only half of us survived the journey. We thought at first that the members of the expedition had certainly deserted of their own accord, or had been devoured by predators or kidnapped by criminal gangs." He paused. "You may have experienced something similar. If there are others in your party, they will be allowed to enter the Palace of Lions freely. Then they'll be captured. Our people fought, and those that did died and were torn apart and eaten by the pride in front of our eyes. The rest of us were herded into this place." His paws were longer this time. "You will find this hard to believe, but the lions have been using us for a labor force." When Sahin and Koyan remained silent, he continued, "The floor of the valley covers a labyrinth. At first we thought it was one deliberately designed as a puzzle, but we've been able to visit enough of it that I think it's city streets, buried by time and shifted dirt. The lower levels show signs of an even older civilization, buried by replacement structures over centuries. This is an ancient place. We found stelae and odd T-shaped pillars and carvings. It's like a Neolithic museum." He stopped at the blank face before him. "I mean, it's older than any archaeological site on the globe. We haven't corroborated, of course, and Scott here disagrees, yet..." Scott interrupted. "What difference does it make, Larry? The fact is, they are keeping us alive as labor. At odd intervals, they take one of our party, and we never see that person again. Oh, we hear them in the distant reaches of the tunnel. One thing on which we agree is that the lions use our worn-out workers as prey to teach their young how to hunt. In the meantime, they use us to teach their young other skills. The cubs are typically inept in their probing of foreign minds, and they can cause damage. Once the targets are of no further use, driven mad, they are hunted and eaten. Dr. Sullivan thinks I'm crazy from exhaustion and privation, but I hear them. I feel their commands. They leave him alone when we are not working. They only issue directions, but they are always with me. Constant images from the minds of predators." His voice cracked, and he giggled quietly for a moment. Then the faux humor descended into cackles of revulsion. Amazingly well preserved, considering the purported data it was built. Wouldn't you say, Hamza? Jim asked the beleaguered official. Supposed to be around 10,000 years old. Maybe even older. Hamza, thirst quenched but throat still raw, croaked. It cannot be that old. Nothing is that old. It would predate creation. He looked about at the bare white bones of the palace, decorated on every surface with images of lions and occasionally their prey. All images besides the leonine were in that context, prey. This is a place of abominations. We must locate the monsters and slaughter them, and destroy this site down to its roots. Jim shook his head and looked forward. Aslan and Tazzy, with one eyebrow raised in question. Aslan chose to answer. The tales are that the Palace of Lions is very old indeed. Many say it was made before creation by the wild ones who roamed the earth. It does not look so old to me, but I am not trained in this area. Jim nodded. I'm not either. Word came down from my boss that this may be part of a prehistoric civilization. Another site to the southeast was discovered a few years ago. It was ignored by the academic archaeologists, but not by my organization. It dates back to around the same period. It's under a place called Potbelly Hill, as I recall. He looked sternly at Hamza. The fact is, no one knows how old civilization is. Even now, there are undeveloped parts of the world just around the corner from others that possess high technology. We know that many ancient civilizations within your dates, Hamza, have risen and fallen while their nearby neighbors remained mired in ignorance. Others influenced those around him, and still others were conquered by barbarians, only to rise again in a new form. We don't know how long that has occurred. We do know that humans in present form have been around longer than anything documented for the general public. He grimaced. I tell you all that because this place is odd and gives me the willies, and I want you to share in that foreboding. Aslan nodded. Tazzy appeared uncomfortable, and Hamza and his thugs wore stupefied expressions. Jim noted that the expressions had grown even duller than usual. Their jaws appeared to be slackened even as he watched. Their eyes glazed, and they stood with arms dangling at their sides. Aslan and Tazzy grew relaxed, but did not slip into the apparent mental haze that affected the others. As far as he could tell, Jim was not affected. Of course, he could be in a dream state and unaware of it, but so far he felt normal. Nope, beginnings of a headache. A real scorcher. He shortly found himself prostrate, and soon Aslan and Tazzy took up grips on either arm and began to drag him deeper into the Palace of Lions. The rich artwork, primitive but specified, loomed all around. The images leered and gaped and wrought the seeds of fear in his mind. Hamza and the others stumbled clumsily along in their wake, stirring the air and the musky scent of larger felines. Sahin greeted his fellows as joyfully as possible under the circumstances. The archaeologists drifted to a back corner of their little prison cell as far from Hamza and his group as possible. I don't know how long, but we are still alive, my friends. I have been set to work for a time, but nothing else. You probably know by now that the lions are not normal. They put thoughts in our head. He indicated Professor Kingsley, who sat in the deepest portion of the corner, knees pulled up to his chest and shivering. That one suffers from hearing them constantly when they get tired of us, or we go insane from their commands. They will use us for food. Aslan bowed and then shook his head. My apologies for getting you into this. I did not know that these things were anything more than an odd big cat infestation. He stopped and looked up and around. They did not build this place, yet it seems it was made for them. The divans molded into the walls, the low passages. It was not made for the comfort of men. Dr. Sullivan chose that point to join the conversation. You are right and wrong at the same time. It seems the lions lived alongside the humans in antiquity. The ruins on the lower levels that appear more ancient show signs of humans living alongside the lions in some sort of truce, maybe even a society. We found one image that appeared to be a chariot drawn by lions, straight out of a Tarzan novel. Unfortunately, the Lord of the Jungle won't be coming to save us. If we can discover a means of escape, it will have to be through our own efforts. When Jim regained consciousness, he found himself face to face with a great shaggy-maned beast. The green-gold eyes bore into his, and the pain and pressure increased. He resisted it until his vision again drew gray and unconsciousness threatened. Then the pressure released, and the pain receded. Slowly, so his mind was able to adjust to the change. "Thank you," he breathed into the lionine features. He hoped absurdly that his breath was as unpleasant to the carnivore as it was to him. He felt an odd tickle in his forebrain that registered as a question about who he was. The question was specific. It focused on him rather than the other members of his party. He understood the nuance that who meant type of human rather than who he was in his individual context. "I don't know what you mean. I'm not from this land and my people." The pressure and pain increased slightly, enough to interrupt his response. The questioner altered his inquiry. "None of the others possess your scent. You smell of beings we thought long extinct." Jim at last understood. "Oh, I have some of their blood. Those I serve gave me more, or maybe increased what I had. They helped me grow into who I am, and that's why they sent me, I believe." The response was satisfaction, and he was rewarded with a comfortable feeling. "You are able to resist our wills. The lesser species cannot. Until recent times, we remained hidden, only legends among them, until memories faded. Now they come to us. They trespass despite the warnings we give. This must stop. We will not tolerate them. I will tell my Pride Masters we will protect this place from the outside world. It is needed. Many of them now have guns and worse. They can destroy this entire valley and all in it. My people will do what we can to avoid that. May we send ambassadors?" To anyone who did not work at DMT Solutions, asking the question of a Felix Leo would seem absurd. The unofficial motto of the organization, "Weird is what we do," assured him and allowed his mind to process the conversation. That and the blood of the high ancients that have been emphasized in his DNA by DMT Inc.'s treatment. I ask that the lesser beings be allowed to come with me. 2 are from my culture, and 2 are local. The other 3 will make good meat. We will consider. With that, the presence left Jim alone inside his skull. A young lioness padded up to him. Her communication caused pain and confusion. She was clearly unused to it and still learning, or so her vibe informed him. "Come. It takes time before deciding. We go eat." She led him to a clean cell and leapt onto a divan placed in the wall. There was a steaming pile of some unfortunate creature, freshly killed and still warm. She tore into it with gusto. Another divan rested some fruit and greenery. Jim surveyed the room. In one corner lay the shredded ruins of a uniform, and the severed and staring head of Koyan. At least it's not one of my friends, he realized, and was relieved. He took a seat and munched on the fruit. He beamed gratitude at a young lady lion who responded with a snarl and a growl. He wasn't sure if it was for interrupting her meal or because he was too inept at the mind link, absent spoken words. The wait was fairly timeless, seated in the dim room. Eventually, what little light there was began to fade. Then an older lioness entered the cell. Her link was clear and strong. "I am 3. You will come now, and we will inform you of our decision." She escorted him the short distance to what was clearly an audience chamber. He hadn't had time to study the space on his previous sojourn. Open windows allowed the fading light and the twinkle of the early stars to seep into the chamber. Old Leo himself stared from the center of the room. The senior members of the Pride encircled him. "You will leave. You may take the 3 locals. You cannot have the others. The 2 that think in the same language as you must remain along with the 3 that are dressed alike." Jim wondered about the numbers. 3 meant that Sahin had survived his wounds. He had observed Koyan's fate. "You may come back as an ambassador and explain what your people offer. It may be that we will hunt with you, as we did the ancient High Ones. We are their equivalent, the kings of beasts as they were kings of humans. You will leave now. Our hunters will escort you." "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but only the 3 locals will be able to accompany me," Jim announced. Once he had been informed that he was allowed to speak to the intruders. "Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Kingsley, if you have documents or any last messages, please give them to me and I'll see that they are delivered. The king has consented to keep you alive until I return, and we will further discuss your future at that time. It's the best I could manage." Larry mumbled, "Indeed, sir. You are no Lord Greystoke." Hamza scrambled to his feet, using the wall as support. "Infidel," he spat. "You would leave us here, feed us to the lower order, even for one of your kind." Jim slapped the man to the floor to silence him, then kicked him in the gut to ensure that the silence continued. "I must admit, I did not argue for any of you. You have each been unpleasant and or stupid. I feel no affinity for either of those attributes. I will not allow you to report your version of events to your government. They would only bring in military-grade weapon and destroy this place. They have no right to do so." He gazed at Aslan and the other 2 hillmen. "They will screen your minds and remove all but dire warnings about this place. Sahin, your cousin was indeed killed by the Pride. It is a feud you cannot pursue. If they think that you will, then you will have to remain." Jim came back to himself from storytelling mode. They ended up keeping Sahin. His mind burned too hotly with the thoughts of revenge. He truly loved his girl cousin. They were to be married, a thing allowed in their culture. I went back, we made an agreement, and we convinced the government that it would be in their best interests to list the problem as resolved and to declare the area off limits. They called it a chemical waste disposal site. Nobody had cause to go out to the boonies anyway. Once the locals mostly stopped disappearing, the good doctors perished. They'd been allowed to live, but poor Kingsley, his mind was destroyed. He killed his fellow, and he and Hamza ate the poor man. I've never encountered any other of the lion folk. We sent in others to examine them. We watch them even today to protect them from extinction. Their ways are strange. Life and death hold different, more primal meanings for them. Funny thing, DMT Solutions studied the lions but never tried to keep or copy them. Telepathy might be a useful attribute to copy, but who wants to trust beings that can control you? especially when they're man-eaters. He shook his head. The tampering with my blood certainly shows in my daughter Edwina. Ed. She's probably pretty angry with me and sad, too. My poor girl, dragged into her daddy's footsteps. I hope what they gave her is worth what she had to suffer. He rolled onto his side and gazed up at the big she-male as she leaned in to pat him in gratitude for his tale. It was a fine tale. Now we know why we can understand you, and why you smell so much better than the others of your kind. We were once friends of the high ancient ones, not unlike the lions. We'll talk later, when you've rested. Jim grinned a yellowed grin and whispered, that was a place of lions. This is a place of the old folk of the forest. Makes my ancient blood sing. So quoth this raven. Have a lovely weekend, my darlings. Thank you so kindly for stopping by my chateau, my darlings. It does mean so much to me. Please, if you have not subscribed, as many of you have not, please do so. Give me a like so I know what you would like to hear. And comment. I always love to read your comments. And special thanks to my Patreon and membership supporters. Ciao, darlings.